So TheWrap reports exclusively, well, not exclusive anymore because now I'm telling you. TheWrap reports that Yann Demange, I think that's how you say his name, I apologize. I think he's French Algerian, so I apologize. But TheWrap reports that Yann Demange is no longer directing the Blade film for the MCU. Supposedly, this is not new, despite it being news. It supposedly happened like weeks ago and it was amicable, but we don't necessarily know the reasons why. So this is not even just a story in of itself. This is part of a long-running kind of saga, a chaotic saga. So for context, a Blade film was announced by Marvel Studios in 2019 at Comic-Con, and they announced and revealed that Mahershala Ali would be playing Blade, which is just perfect casting, right? He really captures the kind of, because I always felt Mahershala Ali was always kind of like a sinister-y character. Even when he's playing a really great guy, he's just would be really good. That's because of how stoic he is and how kind of understated he is. So for him to be, this character, which is like this more darker character, I think everyone went, okay, that's perfect, right? And apparently he thought so as well. He apparently lobbied for the role pretty hard. Like, he basically pitched himself to Kevin Feige, being like, I want to be Blade. I know you're going to make a Blade movie at some point. I want to be Blade. And that's kind of where it ended for a little bit. We did hear Blade's voice in the post-credit scene of the Marvel film Eternals in 2021. We didn't see him, though. We just heard him say one line. And that was basically it. And it was supposed to be directed by a director, Bassam Tariq. But he, and it was a big news story when it happened, he left the project in 2022. And it was just a couple weeks before it was supposed to go into production, right? And there were all these reports coming out of the script just not being in a good place, the whole thing just being in chaos. This was, we don't have evidence or proof of this necessarily to corroborate this, but the rumors were that Blade, the character, had been relegated to essentially the fourth lead of his own film, which seems ridiculous, and to the point where Mahershala Ali himself, the one who had lobbied to be this character, was close to leaving and just being okay, forget this. So then eventually Yann Demange, that director I mentioned, he replaced Tariq. He's a French-Algerian filmmaker. He was, he's known for his work on the TV series Lovecraft Country, as well as Top Boy. And Hollywood Reporter notes that Ali apparently, reportedly handpicked Tariq, right? So it seemed like everything was okay, right? This was a huge setback, but they were going to figure it out. They were going to rework the script. They were going to work with Tariq and Ali and everyone to just go forward. And then, of course, there were delays due to the dual writer strikes from last, last summer and fall. And now we have this, right? And again, I think they were very close to shooting. Again, we don't know why they split amicably. We just know it was amicable. But this does reflect, regardless of the reason, it does reflect something I talked about in a video from a couple weeks ago, which you should all check out, is Marvel, and Disney as a whole, but especially Marvel, is really taking things slower. And instead of content, just pushing out so much shit, trying to take a step back and making sure that things are good before just rushing them out, just so it's because we need X amount of shows for Disney Plus. We need to get X amount of movies into the theaters, right? And this year, the only MCU movie or even Marvel movie coming out is Deadpool and Wolverine, coming out in July, right? And this project really reflects that, because again, it was probably being developed before 2019. But if you just use that as a reference, I mean, it's been 5 years since this thing was announced, and they haven't even started filming, right? Supposedly 6 different screenwriters have taken a stab at the script. The most recent draft that they're working with was done by Eric Pearson, who co-wrote the upcoming Fantastic Four film that's coming out. That's a good question. When is that coming out? I think it's coming out next year. Oh, I can't believe I'm blanking. Yeah, next year, 2025. This would also be coming out in 2025. It's still scheduled for November of that year. But for a huge movie like this, and the fact they haven't started shooting yet, Variety notes that this release date seems very unlikely at this point. And I mean, I thought the same exact thing, that I would be shocked if this does not get delayed, pushed back, what have you. But the stakes are high because Mahershala Ali, like the dude's an actor. The dude's got to work, right? The dude's got to eat. And even doesn't need the money. Like he's an actor. That's what he likes to do. So he's basically been sitting around. Like, I mean, not to use like a really dated analogy, but it's like you're like sitting. It's like you're a girl in the 50s and you're sitting by the phone waiting for the boy to call, right? Like you're just waiting around. So it's like at a certain point, if I was Ali, I would be like, he's currently in negotiations to be in the next Jurassic World movie. So it's like, he can't sit around waiting for this to happen. We have a quote from him from about like half a year ago. I think it was like December of 2023 saying, quote, I'm sincerely encouraged in terms of where things are at and who's on board and who's leading the way as far as the writing of the script and the directing and all that, end quote. But of course now that director is no longer part of this. So how Mahershala Ali feels about all this is anyone's guess. But I think what makes this whole thing interesting is just the corporate incompetence with this whole thing. Because if you take a step back for like 5 seconds, how hard is it to make this movie happen? It's Mahershala Ali as a half vampire, half human vampire hunter. It writes itself. You know what I mean? Of all of the MCU projects that have come before or after, or that have been announced, like this seems like a slam dunk, right? The character has been around for over 50 years. He was created in 1973 in the comics. There was a trilogy of films in the late 90s, early 2000s with Wesley Snipes as Blade that were, at least the first one, and I think the second one as well, were fairly well liked and fairly successful. And a lot of people argue that those films actually kind of kickstarted the modern superhero genre, which I think is up for debate since it was R-rated, whereas X-Men and then Spider-Man were PG-13 and had a much wider audience. But in any case, he's a very popular character, right? So the fact the MCU they're having so much trouble is really strange. And I'm going to say something that I think is reductive, right? But just kind of taking a step back from that and just taking what I'm about to say at face value. The MCU really faced a crossroads with the death of Chadwick Boseman, right? And they ultimately decided not to recast the character. And I think that was the smart move. But a lot of people have complained, so we don't have like a prominent black superhero anymore. Like now we have his Shuri, his sister, but who knows how often we're going to see her as that, because that movie wasn't super, super successful. And also people just arguing like, okay, so we don't get a male black superhero for black boys to look up to, right? Not to be reductive where it's just like, well, you have this, you lost this black superhero, so why not just have this black superhero, right? That's very reductive. It's very different because Black Panther was not just about having a black superhero, but it was very much about black excellence and like Afrofuturism, and it's a very, very different beast than Blade, right? But by doing this movie, you could potentially give that community, replacement is the wrong word. I do not mean it like that. I'm trying to kind of find the right way to kind of pitch this, but give have that representation in the cast of characters that is ultimately gone. Because even if you do have Shuri being Black Panther, she's not like the A-list level of characters at this point, whereas Blade could be, right? So that could kind of serve as, if not a replacement, a alternate kind of source of representation on screen for those communities, right? But again, it just seems really dumb. The whole thing seems dumb. I don't know why they can't figure this movie out. Like a monkey could write this movie. Like a someone who's never written a movie could probably take 10 minutes and come up with something for this, because this is just like so obvious. But maybe that's just me.